Good evening, folks. This is the Goffstown Board of Selectmen's meeting for December 2nd, 2024. We're getting a little bit of a late start due to technical difficulties, but we're up and running now, and you haven't missed any of the exciting meeting yet. So if you'd all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This afternoon, we were sent some minutes. I don't know if anybody's really had a chance to
Yep, I
go
looked at them.
over them. Did you? I did not. But it's okay. That was, oops. Certain set of minutes. Let me take a look at which ones they were.
They're from November 18th.
So we have the minutes that were sent to us today for November 18th. I read them, but I couldn't read the date on it. There it is.
Make
Need
a
motion?
make a motion to approve the minutes on November 18th as presented with corrections if need be.
I'll second.
That was a motion by Mark, seconded by Kelly. Jim, you were on the phone, so you're available. So, any discussion, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Motion passes. We have any announcements, Derek?
There's one.
There's one in your packet at tab 4A.
One time, the last day to accept petition to amend the town zoning ordinance, historic district ordinance, or building code for consideration at the 2025 town meeting is Wednesday, December 11th, 2024. All petitions must be signed by at least 25 registered voters that reside in the town of Goffstown, and the correct warrant article form in accordance with RSA 675:4. If you have any questions, see the planning department or call 497-8990, extension 117 for assistance. Have we, I was thinking about this, have we mentioned the postings yet for overnight parking? I don't remember
I
doing
don't
it.
think that we have. That usually starts up on November 15th,
It
so.
should be coming out tonight.
All right,
Email was sent about.
Huh?
An email was sent about 1:30 today.
okay. Just something that happened to think of today when I was driving down the road.
Yeah.
I haven't heard this yet. I haven't read that one yet. All right, Derek. Is there anybody here for public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and we'll go on to the town administrator's report on 6.
All right, at tab 6A, you have your committee meeting schedule for the next 2 weeks. Tomorrow night at 5:30 p.m. at Parks and Rec, the Village Bridge Ad Hoc Committee will meet.
Got it.
At 6 p.m., Budget Committee will meet at the high school.
I'll be there.
On Wednesday at 6 p.m., Economic Development Council will be in this room.
Oh, that's me. Yep.
At 6:30 p.m., Library Board of Trustees at the library.
Yep.
On Thursday at 7 p.m., the Planning Board will be holding their zoning amendment workshop.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Next week, on Tuesday at 6 p.m., Budget Committee will be at the high school. Wednesday, 9 a.m., the Highway Safety Committee.
Yep,
6:30 p.m. Wednesday next week, HDC.
yep.
And at 7 p.m., Conservation Commission.
I have it.
Thank you. And Thursday of next week, Budget Committee will be meeting at the high school.
Yep.
And the Planning Board will be meeting at 7 p.m.
That's a regular meeting. for the-
That's a regular meeting for the
Yep.
Planning Board.
Yeah.
At your next page, you have your consent agenda. You have for employee status reports, full-time police officer, new hire, a per diem EMT, this is a temporary increase, wage increase, per diem EMT, new hire, and then a full-time firefighter, this is the AEMT incentive. That's spelled out in the CBA. And then you have 4 sidebars with the town's unions for the vacation buyback program.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have one question, and I don't know if you can answer it for me, or we have to ask Fire Chief. These temporary increases to address staffing shortages, how long do they last?
So you approved the extension at your meeting last meeting. It's for 6 months.
6 months?
Yes.
I just was double checking.
Yep.
And do you know if we have, over at DPW, we had that program when we were bringing in laborers more or less as truck drivers, and then they had to pass the test. Do we still have any of those out there?
No, we do not. We put in different language into the CBA that was approved by voters at town meeting this year, so that in the past, there were so many slots for truck drivers. A laborer would have to wait until a truck driver got promoted or left before they could do that. Now they could stay a laborer as long as I guess they wanted, but once they get their CDL, they automatically.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So we corrected that in the last CBA.
Yep. I have a motion on the floor.
Motion to approve.
No, it was already, Kelly made
I
the
made a
motion.
We did, I'll second it.
Call is seconded. Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, motion passes.
At your next page, you have assessor's recommendations. This is for 2024 abatements for map 34, lot 164A, and map 27, lot 6-1. These are both properties that the town purchased in 2024, but it was after the first property tax bill went out. So this is to abate that amount.
Motion to approve the assessor's recommendation is presented.
Second.
Which properties were they in?
Rotary Park and the property on Henry Bridge Road.
So a motion by Mark, seconded by Kelly. Any further discussion on it? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, motion passes.
Thank you. At your next page, you have a recommendation from the Library Board of Trustees. They met on November 20th and recommend Kirsty Hazelbaker to serve in the vacant alternate seat. This will be till March 31st, 2025.
I'll make a motion to appoint Christy Hazelbaker as an alternative member to the Library Board of Trustees with a term expiring March 31st, 2025.
Second.
Motion by Kelly, seconded by Collis. Was it Collis? Or Jim?
Yes.
Collis?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining, motion passes.
At tab 6E, you have a draft encumbrance list. The final encumbrance list will come to the board on December 16th. However, this is an opportunity for the board to review the information and ask questions about it. I was informed this evening there will be a new entry from the police department. They've ordered $10,500 worth of uniforms from East Coast Outfitters, and that PO had yet to be entered. They believe with the delay in delivery that they will need to have that PO encumbered as well. So that will be in addition to the list that you have here.
I think my question on this, Derek, is if we go down to DPW Continental Paving, 500,000, that's just a blank and you use it wherever? Is that how that works?
So he usually uses that on his spring overlays, and we expect that may be reduced a little bit with some end of the year bills, but that's what the PO is currently encumbered at.
Okay. But that'll all be PO'd, right? Or it is?
It is POs in the
Okay.
system already. You'll see we've got, I think there's only a handful at the very beginning that have a PO number that has yet to be assigned. But all the other already have POs that are in our financial software.
And we'll be getting another report, you said.
You'll have the final list at your meeting on December 16th. But again, this is an opportunity, if you have any questions between now and the 16th, if you could reach out to Danielle, myself, and the appropriate department head, we can get an answer for you so that we can have you act on this on the 16th.
And these are through when, do we know? Like, if I go to second page, and the very first one where it says recycling removal,
Yes.
and the year-to-date expended is $31,965.
So this was all put together by the finance office last week. And we did not run an AP warrant last week, so this is really through the 26th or 27th when they ran all this information, the year-to-dates. So this is pretty current. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things like that haven't been expended, you know, if you go down that whole list.
Yes. Yep.
Is there actually POs for the projects?
Yes, with that specific, the specific vendor named, yes, there are POs. You've got, I think it's the 5th column over where it's got a PO number, so that's already entered and the work is ready to get started even if funds haven't been expended yet.
And that one for admin, where do we stand on that?
For the GIS agreement?
No, for the MPU grant expense?
So, that one, we did not receive any bids. There was a little bit of confusion about posting the RFP. I did not get the RFP up onto the website. Normally I would task Catherine to do that, but there was definitely some miscommunication there. So that one closed. We were due to get bids in, but we didn't receive any bids, but I think it was due to lack of advertising it. So at this point, I would say that you need to use those funds for some other project. We won't necessarily get bids in, and then we could explore if the board wants to explore that in a future budget cycle.
And that was for upstairs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you have an idea what we're going to use it for?
I think I proposed to you at your last meeting that we use
A
portion of the funds for the annual service for the third-party monitoring of the new servers for 25 and 26. I know that Rick has gotten, he got his bids in for the pool removal. And I think the low bidder order was around $40,000 for that. And then if there are any one-time projects, the hard thing is you really need to have it under contract. So be any purchases that we can do here at the end of the year.
Do we need to do a meeting next week?
If the board would like to,
I
we
mean,
can.
do we need to? I mean, to get some of this stuff put
Otherwise,
together?
you're going to be making final decisions on the 16th. If you want some time to consider that, then yes, we could meet on the 9th just to focus on the encumbrance list, but also those COVID funds.
I think it's important, we don't want to lose that stuff. So,
Eric, on the, if I may. Peter.
Go ahead.
On the, let's see, it's on page 3. It's the impact fee update, OJ planning and development. There's still quite a bit left to be expended. Are we confident that they're going to be on schedule in delivering that to us?
And so I would have to check with Joanne on that. We put a slight pause in that study until CIP finished up in September.
Okay.
Because the vendor really wanted to see an updated approved CIP list. So we need to, I know I talked to Joanne a couple weeks ago about it to see where it stands. She was going to reach out to the vendor and see about getting that started up again.
Okay, thank you.
I can tell you the very last one down there for the library, they have it on the agenda for Wednesday night. They're talking about what to do with those funds. Now, when these funds, Derek, when these funds are allocated for a certain project, you can, if there's monies left over, they're spent wherever?
No, if you, if there's money remaining on the encumbrance and the project is done, then that money lapses back to the general fund into unassigned fund balance. What it will be is at the end of the year, you go from your appropriation, it actually gets into a fund balance category that is, I forget the precise term, but it's an allocated fund balance, that it actually has a reservation for what it's being used for. But then, once the project is done, or if for some reason the project was abandoned and the PO was liquidated, it liquidates back to unassigned fund balance.
Okay. Well, I think we talk about maybe coming in next week for an hour or so, just to,
Yeah, it's fine.
there's a lot of money sitting here, so.
Okay.
Anything else towards the end of the year we might want to take a look at? Next?
So again, just to reiterate on that, if you have any specific questions, if you reach out to us, we'll get answers for
Yep.
you. But, so
Yeah,
your next,
I'll take this and make some calls, so.
okay. At your next page, your next tab, 6F, little I, this is looking to have you set the date of the 2025 deliberative session. The school has set theirs for Monday, February 3rd, with a snow date of Wednesday, February 5th. I think it's worked well in the past when we've dovetailed with them and held ours on Tuesday with a snow date on Thursday of the week. So the request would be, or the recommendation would be to set it for Tuesday, February 4th at 7 p.m. with a snow date of Thursday, February 6th at 7 p.m.
I'll make a motion to set the 2025 deliberative session for Tuesday, February 4th at 7 p.m. with a snow date of Thursday, February 6th at 7 p.m.
Second.
Anybody questions? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
Thank you. At your next page, you have a memorandum from the assessor regarding solar exemptions. The town adopted solar exemptions in 2015, and at that time it was to exempt the value of solar panels up to a maximum of the first 10 kilowatts. Those have significantly increased in size, so there's quite a few panels are out there that exceed the 10 kilowatt level. So for a property owner that's applied, the first 10 kilowatts would be exempt, and then the value beyond that would actually be subject to taxation. So the assessor wanted to make you aware of this and see if the board had any interest in raising that limit.
Jim, did you?
So the reason we might do that is to encourage more people to
Yes.
go to solar.
Yes. Yeah, and I think if you see on the second paragraph on page 2, he's got kind of two scenarios. You could increase the exemption limit to 20 kilowatts, which would increase the value by just 163,000. That would be exempt. So you're talking, and whenever you're doing an exemption, you are shifting the tax burden to other property
Right.
taxpayers. But that would be a shift of 1/10 of a cent on the tax rate. So it's very small shift. And then he also, if you wanted to do it even smaller, you could do 15 kilowatts. Again, this is really the reason you have different exemptions is to encourage certain.
But would this fall similarly to, I mean, I know when we vote, it's on the amount for any of the tax exemptions. Is this something else that should be brought to the voters with, it's a limit, right, a financial?
Yes, so this would be a warrant article.
Okay.
So you would propose, so if the board wanted to, you would propose it as part of the warrant and the voters would vote on it in March. But I guess the assessor at this point is just making you aware that we're getting a lot more solar panels that are larger than 10 kilowatts. And the question is, does the board have any interest in exempting those larger panel installations?
Well, I wouldn't mind boosting it up a little bit. I mean, I don't know if we go double it, but.
Do these apply to commercial properties too?
Yeah, they would, I believe, I would have to look at the RSA, 7262. I don't believe that there is a distinction between residential and commercial.
I would kind of, personally, I think we
Make it?
should ease it up a little bit, go up to the 5, up to the 15, instead of doubling it right off the bat. I
was
think it's
gonna go for
easier
the
to
20.
chew.
I was gonna go for the 20, but
Huh?
I was gonna go for the 20. If we're gonna do it, let's do it and make it worth it.
Well, I'm looking at the expense and selling it to the public. You don't want to get it defeated because of that, that's all I'm saying, but I don't, it doesn't make, 6 half one doesn't have another, I mean.
I'm okay with it.
It's only a-
Bringing it to the voters, that's the important thing.
Yep.
$30,000 difference between the two.
Which is not much.
Right.
In the scheme of things, so. So, somebody make the motion.
I make a motion to, on the solar exemption to go to, was it 20 kW?
Yes, that's what
20
it-
kW.
20 kW.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion on it? Mark made the motion, call was seconded. No further discussion, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, motion passes.
And that's what we're putting on the warrant article, right?
Yes, I did. the warrant article.
Thank you.
And then at tab 6F, triple I, last year, the board proposed a change to the GTV revolving fund. Last year, the board changed it so that 70% of cable franchise revenue is deposited in the fund. Prior to that, it was only 40% was deposited in that fund. Our recommendation from staff to keep the GTV revolving fund stable as the cable franchise revenue is slowly decreasing every quarter. We are seeing people as they move away from Xfinity Comcast, that we are seeing a reduction in that revenue. But to maintain operations at GTV is our recommendation that you move 100% of the cable franchise revenue into that fund.
How is that fund now, as far as what's in that fund, I guess is
We
my
do
question.
not have a lot of fund balance in that fund. We had proposed last year to go to 100% last year, but the decision of the board last year was to kind of split that 60%, so you did 30% last year to get it up to 70%. Our recommendation is to get it to 100%, and then that way we can maintain the level of service that they're currently providing the community and continue to fund the equipment that they need. As you know, the equipment gets more expensive every year.
Where does that 30% that's not put in the fund now go?
It goes into the general fund.
The general fund?
Yes, so it's in the general fund. When we prepared the revenue estimates for the board, we zeroed that line out, knowing that we'd be bringing forward this recommendation. So that's about $90,000 that would otherwise go to the general fund.
What kind of dollars are we talking about?
So right now, the general fund's receiving about $90,000 a year.
And you want to jump it to like 110, is that?
No, I want to shift that from the general fund to the GTV revolving
No,
fund.
how much is that fund from Comcast now? What do we receive dollar-wise?
Oh, what do we receive dollar-wise? We're getting about $300,000 a year total. So the 4 quarterly checks are, it's actually just below $300,000.
So you're believing we need $300,000 to run that GTV?
I think in the first few years, you're gonna end up building up your fund balance. And then eventually, you're gonna get to a point where you're gonna have to figure out what you're gonna do with that fund, because looking at the way cable franchise fee, I think that's gonna continue to decrease. That, one, there may be a change on the FCC level at some point where I know the cable providers have a strong federal lobbying group that have tried to get those changed, saying that it's unfair that the cable operators have to pay a franchise fee, but internet streaming services do not. So I expect with the next administration that push will be revived, and we might get to a point where cable companies no longer have to pay communities a revolving fee or a revenue fee. So the first few years, I think you're gonna be building up that fund balance, if there's no changes. You're gonna be building up fund balance, because again, it is a revolving fund. And then eventually you hit a break-even point, and then you'll have to make some hard decisions on how you fund and GTV.
I'm not sure if it's a good idea to build up revolving fund with that, with the current attitudes on that, as far as having money set aside. We're gonna try to do a fire truck, I hope, this year on capital reserve fund. I think we need to make sure that all that stuff is taken care of. I mean, it doesn't matter, you're not talking a huge amount of money, you're talking, but I just think we need to be careful what we're doing. Sentiments are not real high right now on those type of funds.
Although continuing to adequately fund GTV is important to me, because more and more, there's a lot of people out there, more than I ever realized, who watch these meetings and rely on it as their source of information, so I would be in favor of it.
Yeah, I would agree.
And this also goes to the voters.
Right.
Yeah, it goes to the voters, because if it,
You wanna
I
make-
guess it's how it's worded,
Yeah, you want to make sure it survives.
how it's worded, that it's gonna be the additional, an additional 30%, and not encompass that we lose the 70 we already have. You know what I'm saying?
I don't, no.
If the article was written to take 100% of the fund towards GTV, right? And it gets defeated, would you lose the 100%?
No, you would not. So there is, you do have in your packet, you do have the sample language. It would basically, to increase the amount of franchise fee revenues from 70% to 100%. So if that were to fail, it would remain at 70%.
Okay,
You're
I'm good
not,
with-
you're not
yeah,
losing
I get
that.
it. Okay, I get it. Okay.
I think it's a good thing, so I'll make a motion to include an article on the 2025 warrant to modify the cable access revolving fund established in 2013 so that 100% of cable franchise revenue is deposited into the fund.
Second.
Motion by Collins, second by Jim. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, motion passes.
So those are the items that I had, and then you had a few items of old business that carried over from last week's meeting.
Right. Now, you just got a revised copy of the, let's start with the personnel plan, and we'll go over that. This was changed as of when?
Today. So I've highlighted what's changed, and I'll review those with you.
Okay, good. Are you changing, are you highlighting what was changed today? But
Yes.
not in total?
Correct.
So you have to take the one from last week?
They're all in here, but the ones that changed today are actually highlighted in yellow.
Okay,
So
yellow, okay.
everything is incorporated in the one
So
document.
the ones in red are,
Have already been there.
okay.
Yep, so those were reviewed last time. So after receiving some additional feedback from departments, we have a few more changes to suggest. On page 4, you'll see the first one under promotions. We just wanted to make sure it was clear that even if there's someone internally in service that could be promoted, that there still has to be at least a 2-day posting period to allow any internal applicants to apply for the position if they feel they may be eligible or qualified. The next page, page 5, just a correction to the section number. In yellow, you see at the top under subsection D, it said section 8, and those are now 6 and 7, just with the renumbering, it got missed.
Yeah.
Continue along, the next one you're going to see is,
Well, you have the whole yellow, a whole red page on 7, right? That was all.
yep, and that was all in there the last time. No changes were suggested outside of what we had proposed last time. And I'm happy to answer questions on any sections if you had questions when you reviewed them since last meeting. The next change you'll see is on page 18. We added, under travel reimbursement, we added the word overnight to make it clear that travel reimbursement is for overnight travel or out-of-state travel and not, I'm going to Concord for the day, so does the town pick up my lunch tab?
What page was that?
18.
Okay.
Just adding some clarity after we got some feedback there. I believe that was it for changes since the last meeting. The rest were all in here previously. That was it since the last meeting. So pretty minor changes, and I'm happy to answer questions or help locate anything within the document itself.
Just a color question. Page 20, I just assumed that green meant you were just taking it right out, but
Green means it was relocated from somewhere else in the document, but no changes were made. So on page 20,
the
that's,
green ones, it's right through the
Yep.
actual wording, that's gone.
it was just moved. So it's
Just
showing you
moved,
where
I
it was
see.
originally located with the strike through, and then where it lands in the new place is still green, but without the
Okay,
strike
okay,
through.
all right, thank you.
And then any changes, so if you look at page 20, you'll see the only change suggested to that green paragraph under vacation time is the addition of the word continuously.
Continuous, yeah, okay.
On that same page, page 20, Jimmy happens to be over. I was concerned about the new hires and the vacation time. And the way this is, gets, they receive a day of vacation of an average work week for each month. So, and after a year, they would have over 2 weeks vacation?
Up to 10.
No, up to 10. So this is only in the first year. This is actually already in our existing policy. You can see at the top where it was removed, new hires shall immediately receive a day of vacation, 1/5 of an average work week for each month remaining, up to a maximum of 10.
Okay,
So we moved that down below, and then we added a clarification that employees who separate during their probationary period will not be paid out for their unused vacation. So if somebody's hired in July, they're only going to get a day for each month remaining. They won't get July, but they would get August, September, October, November, December, which is 5 days. The only way somebody could ever get to the maximum is if they're hired in December for January or February, something like that.
and then when the temporary employee becomes a full-time employee, does a temporary employee work 35, 40 hours? How does that work?
So it depends on what their employment status was. So in their temporary employment, they would have to qualify those hours as full-time, so they would have to at least meet the threshold. Currently, under the town's policy, full-time has to be at least 32 hours, I believe. That's how it's listed. So in their temporary position, they would have to maintain, it's 30. Full-time employees who are between 30 and 34 will be eligible for vacation. So they have to at least have 30 hours in that temporary status in order for any of that time to kind of convert. But when they are converted to full-time, that's when they would get their, a permanent status is when they would get vacation.
Okay, so a temporary employee who's working, like over at DPW and works 35 hours a week, and then is converted over, right? And then somebody to say who works in town clerk's office or for Parks and Rec, they only have to work 30 hours a week to get the same amount of time off.
So all of our time is prorated based on the hours worked. So it's 1/5 of an average work week. So if somebody works a 35-hour week, then a day for them is 7 hours. But if somebody works a 40-hour week, a day is 8 hours. So it's going to be specific based on the amount of time that they were scheduled. So if they were scheduled for a 35-hour week, a day for that person is different than a 40-hour person.
Okay, but we're talking about when they convert over, one person is only working 30 hours a week and someone else could be working 40 hours a week. The 30-hour a week is going to get the same compensation or...
They're not, it's prorated, so they're gonna get the amount applicable to what they were working. So if somebody was working 35 hours a week, one day is a different value than someone who's working 40 hours a week.
Okay, I maybe
Am I not trying to think of how else to explain it? So they'll still get a day.
You count the hours instead of the days? Is that what you do? They count the hours, and if somebody works 30 hours, that's still not a full week? If their position's a 30-hour week?
If their position's a 30-hour week and they're a temporary employee, they don't get any vacation time. It would only be if their position were then created to be permanent or they were filled into a permanent position, then essentially their date of hire goes back to when they were hired on that temporary status, because it has to be a continuous service without a break.
But my point is that 30-hour employee, that 30-hour week counts as a week.
For them, which is only 30 hours. It's all based on hours.
I don't think you're getting what I'm saying.
So if a 30-hour employee,
Somebody works
is-
upstairs, let's say in the planning office, right? We hire somebody that's
Part-time,
part-time, right? And they're working 30 hours a week in a temporary position. Well, then we decide to keep that person on board in November. We hired them in January. They would get the credit for for 1 day for each month from when they started. Somebody gets hired, the same situation at DPW, but he's working 40 hours a week. He only gets 1 day also.
But the days
But
are
their
different.
days are
Somebody
different.
will have an 8-hour day and some will have
Okay,
a,
that explains a little
that-
bit, all right.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so the value is based on their average of what schedule they're working. So when we say someone gets 2 weeks of vacation, for some people that's 80 hours of time, for some people that's 70 hours of time because it's 35-hour weeks that they work.
We work 12 hours.
But if you take that temporary person and make him a 40-hour, how does that work?
Then we
You
do a
go prorate it
conversion.
back?
Yeah, we do a
Okay.
conversion
All right,
prorated.
okay, better.
I have a question. On page 21, so kind of in that same link, the part that's highlighted in the last sentence, personal days for part-time employees are defined as the average length of the normally scheduled workday. Can we make that defined to their normally scheduled workday?
Yep.
Go back to the same type of thing, right?
Well, no, just
I get
a
it.
clarification that it's whatever's on your offer letter, not what's a normal workday for the department, for
Right.
the, whatever.
Mhm.
It's whatever's on their offer letter.
That makes sense.
So you just changed the to
Just
their?
adding-
To there, just
Yeah.
add the item.
Okay.
I had a real quick question from before, but I didn't want to stop. On page 7, it says the position must be covered by a CBA classified as a non-exempt hourly position. Salaried employees cannot be hired without prior approval from the appointing authority, which is,
The select board or the library board of trustees or the
Okay.
search, whoever the governing body is for that position.
so, okay, so I can put it in a governing body.
Did you add in there somewhere that they must complete their onboarding documentation before starting work?
If not, it better be added real quick.
I was gonna say, I know we put it in the conditional offer of employment letter,
Okay.
and this clarifies the conditional offer letter under the first bullet must be reviewed by the HR director or the town administrator before it can be issued by a department.
Well, there's a lot to consume all this. You know. Does this need to be ratified tonight?
So we have so the personnel plan does have a section about amendments, and that amendments will be posted for 30 days before they go into effect. It was our hopes that the board would adopt these this evening, and they could go into effect at the beginning of 2025.
Good.
I have a question. Page 24, at the bottom, where it says the second sentence in that bottom red section, the town may continue to provide the same insurance coverage to the employee, spouse, and/or family up to 6 months at the discretion of the board. I didn't read much further, but the offering to have them pay if they want.
So, the way it's in there now, it's compliant with USERRA. Currently, they always have the opportunity to continue under COBRA coverage that would be applicable to them, which would be them paying. This just allows the board the authority to make the extension, especially if it's something like a temporary assignment overseas or something like that.
I just meant that they could, like, pay to keep their family on if they're paying the full share, similarly to what we do if someone's on an extended leave that's outside of the policy. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, that we would give them the option to pay out of pocket if they wanted. I mean, anybody who's on extended military leave is gonna have TRICARE offered to them anyway, so
Right.
it's probably not something that's come up, but if it follows you, Sarah, that's fine. I just know we've done that in other extenuating circumstances, and I would assume that we would
I'd be
be
real
supportive
cautious on
of-
that.
Why?
Not just paying insurance for 6 months, like you said, if they would participate.
Right, to pay to pay the full share.
Right.
That's what I meant.
But that's not what this is saying.
Correct.
So,
This is saying that if somebody goes out, that we could just arbitrarily just say, okay, I'm gonna pay your insurance for.
yeah, currently what
Up
it
to
says
6
is that the
months.
board can make that decision for up to 6 months, and the only time this wouldn't apply currently is if somebody was on like a temporary, like if they're in a National Guard situation and they're just on training for a week or two, that wouldn't change anything because it's not even beyond the normal month. But a couple times this has come up and we've come back to the board, and it was actually a discussion at the time. The board had said, why don't we think about putting something that says 90 days will just be an automatic continuation in there? Because if somebody is on a temporary assignment, it wasn't the intention at the time for their coverage to change and have to have them jump off or on, because we would then end their coverage, they would go under COBRA, pay 100%
Right.
until they return, and then they'd come back into a qualifying status. And the board had said, why bother doing that if they're only going to be gone for a 3-month assignment?
But their return would trigger a qualifying life event, though, right?
It would, yeah.
Okay.
So we were just trying to get the language in there to adopt kind of that 90 days as a ground rule, and then if they wanted to go beyond that, the board would have to have a discussion.
Yeah, if you were in an extension period. No, that makes sense.
And it has to be posted 30 days before the first year, for what reason, or first?
It needs to be posted for 30 days before the changes take effect.
And it has to take effect in January?
It doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to. We were hoping to be able to have a clean break that in 2025, here's our policy for the year, to be able to provide everybody the notice as well as provide new hires with what our personnel plan will be.
But there's no requirement. I mean, I think the only thing in here that we have enacted is a change to the insurance share.
Right. That's on page
It's at the
26.
end,
On page 26, and that has to do clarifying that 125 flexible benefit plans will match the limit set by IRS, which was a vote of this board in the past, but it was never included. And then the request from Health Trust to reduce the HSA contribution to our high deductible plan to 50%, and then the board's decision. So the board has already made those kind of two decisions, but we hadn't actually adopted them in there.
Right, so we would have to post those at a minimum to take effect for January 1st. Because that's what all of our open enrollment.
Well, we've already
paperwork has.
adopted those, right?
The open enrollment paperwork is out there. It hasn't officially been part of the personnel plan.
Yeah, but we've already adopted it, didn't we already adopt that?
You voted to move forward
You
with
voted to move
those.
forward
Right.
with them, yeah. So most of the changes in here were items that were discussed at the last meeting or,
Okay, well, that was kind of thrown on our desk, and we never really, we had to go through all that. We didn't really get a chance to go through it and go page by page like we're doing now. I would have liked to have had the comments and recommendations from the attorneys that came in and spoke to us, and then have that pointed out in here, okay, we took care of this problem here.
oh, okay, those are in here.
But you know what I'm saying, I said, have it, okay, the reason why we did this is because when we met with the attorneys, this is what they said. But I get it, I mean, if everybody thinks we got it covered, then I'm good with it.
Yeah, the attorney's recommendations are included. They start on page 11, where she had indicated seniority should be moved into a different section of the policy. And then on page 12, you see the additional language in red that came directly from the attorney to make sure that we have clear designation on what an exempt versus non-exempt status is. That continues with the seniority that I had just referenced was moved from page 11. Longevity, that was not the attorney's change, that was a department recommendation that we were trying to get everybody onto that single schedule.
Which was done today.
No, this was
No.
done at the last one. Yep. No, the only changes that were done today were those couple in yellow that I had referenced at the beginning. And then the rest of the attorney's changes you'll see on page 15, under hours of employment, where she has defined the work week very clearly to make sure that we're calling out the difference between a regular work week and special pay period work weeks for our emergency services. Defines payroll periods and the payroll deductions to get that RSA required language into the policy. Reporting time worked that she had discussed with you, including her draft language. And it continues on to the overtime, cleaning up that section to make it clear that employees will be paid for all hours worked. However, once they hit 40 hours, it will switch to time and a half.
Whatever happened to the 2-week pay period?
So the 2-week pay period, we have language in a couple of our CBAs now that we can move forward with it once we set a date timeline. And then we haven't had any dates chosen for.
I thought we were
non-union.
looking forward to having something like that done in July, and here it is 6 months later, and we still haven't done anything. Just kind of drag our feet on everything, So,
We do have a couple vacancies right now in the finance office, so right now it's
oh yeah.
me and Zach. upstairs.
Obviously, we had plenty of time to go through this stuff. So, I mean, this is something we talked about a year ago, a 2-week pay period. And this would have been the time to implement it when you're redoing this. But,
So has the lawyer who recommended some of these changes, has she reviewed
She has.
this, what we have here?
She's reviewed the changes that are in here, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's
She
okay.
said that there's other sections that you can see haven't had changes that she thinks may be worth looking at in a future year once we have available funding in the budget. Derek and I were hesitant to do an entire revamp of the whole policy in a default budget year where we'd already exceeded the legal line.
But she's okay with what we would vote on tonight?
She has reviewed all of those sections.
no, I'm good with it. I
Yeah,
mean,
let's move
it's
on.
done now. I mean, you're not gonna redo it all. You've got, you know, it's been pushed onto you, so let's get it out of the way. I'm still disappointed we didn't go work on that 2-week pay period we talked about a year ago, and we, oh yeah, July 1st. Nope, never happened.
Did that have to be negotiated in CBAs?
Yes.
Okay. How many more, after this, how many more will be left to put the 2-week work week in there?
I would have to
I
confirm,
believe we have at least
it
one.
would just be the one that you're currently in negotiations with.
Okay.
I mean, talk about cost savings, there is a cost savings to that.
Yeah.
And employee time savings also. All right, somebody want to make a motion on this plan, personnel
I'll
plan?
make a motion, we move forward with the personnel plan that was presented to us tonight for 2024-25.
With my tiny little edit, please.
I'm sorry?
With my tiny little edit, please.
Yeah,
For there.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Mark, seconded by Collis. Any further discussions or questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. Next one was do we need to go through the salaried one also?
Yes. This one, there were a couple items that we had highlighted at the last meeting for the board to consider language. This was the attorney's draft language for this policy. You can see the department recommendation is in yellow within the green boxes. And that is the new information. So under the regular schedule and flex time, the departments were recommending a language that would allow flex time to be used within 30 days of it being worked, understanding that sometimes it's not possible to accomplish I had a Tuesday meeting, so I'm not going to work Friday or something like that. So they were looking for a little bit more flexibility on that rather than within the 7-day pay period. Of course, it's at the board's discretion what limit you'd like to set. And then the other one was the 4-day work schedule that the attorney had as just an example built into the policy. It's the department's recommendation that department head discretion can be used to set alternate work schedules that would still be operationally feasible and maintaining department coverage. So for some people, we know right now the fire department's using a 4-day schedule for some of their command staff with alternating days so that there's always someone there. And that they have more coverage time with the crews who work longer shifts. And DPW, same thing, where they have, 10-hour days in the summers and stuff like that, making sure that they have supervisors that are non-union available on site.
Number 3, I disagree with so wholeheartedly.
What's number 3? The flex time?
Yeah. It's what happens if somebody at DPW is working, has to work at night or something, then they kind of take the time off? Mike Hillhouse, Jason, any of those guys, they have to work, say they're plowing, which they do. So they're plowing on a Thursday, they gotta take Friday off?
Well, no, that's what we're recommending against. The
That's what
attorney had
This one
language
is
in
the
there
new
that
one.
said the same pay period, and we had immediately flagged that saying, we don't think that's gonna work for that exact reason, as you gave an example. So instead, we're recommending the language
30
below
days.
that allows them 30 days to use that time, because all week may be snow for an entire week or something, and
So 3, where it says work hours can be flexed within the same work week is out.
right.
Right.
We're
Okay,
recommending.
And you're
The
going to the
green
one
under the
below.
green
Okay, that's
box.
better. I
Yeah, the green
misunderstood
box.
that.
But I do want something that says that it has to be approved, because there's nothing in that currently that said,
Up above, doesn't it?
oh.
Use of flex leave? Is that
From a
what you're
meeting
saying?
Correct.
supervisor to flex.
Well, it says any exception to the rule has to come to the select board, but that, the use of flex time needs to be approved by,
Doesn't it say that up top? Except
Hold
to the
on.
extent employees
I
have
was just
received-
reading the yellow, hold on.
Approval in advance.
Okay,
Yeah, the
that's fine.
supervisor approves.
And then the other clarifying language that we added in here based on the attorney's recommendation was flex time would not be considered an accrual and will not be paid out upon separation.
Yep.
Because remember how she had discussed potential for claims later on if someone thinks
Yeah.
it's accrued time.
For the operationally feasible and maintain the necessary department coverage, is that supposed to be for an extended period of time?
Yeah, that's not intended for a week-by-week change.
Okay.
That's intended for, hey, we're gonna go ahead and make your schedule, you don't have to arrive till 9 AM, or you don't have to work more than 4 days a week, or whatever it
So
may be.
I want to add that then includes an updated
Notification to
offer
the
letter that they
personnel.
need to sign, a
Mhm.
personnel change.
Yes, because
And
schedule
also
changes
that
are
it needs
required.
to be approved by the select board.
Okay,
Only, I'll say, I trust that the department heads are capable of making those decisions. However, up until now, we have had any request of that nature come to us, and I think for tracking purposes, to see how this is working, that makes sense, if it's for an extended period of time. Yes, I agree that they're signing that they understand this, but I'm saying when this change takes place, I want that employee
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
to sign off on their new schedule. is
right,
what I'm
which we
asking.
do have to do under the Department of Labor recommendations, so, requirements, so it is good to have that language right in here, so it doesn't get overlooked.
And if it's for like a long-term, like we're fully changing your schedule, I think to talk through, for us to hear from the department heads, the rationale, the coverage, we've done that for every department who's asked for that now, so I think it's good to have that in there, and I think it could be removed later if it becomes a more regular thing, maybe it needs to be, but.
Okay, so.
Do you want to
something-
define long-term?
No.
What would be long-term?
Okay, so if this was being implemented, you told me I could have a 4-day work week, right?
Yep.
My expectation is that we would have the employee sign off an employee status report or a letter of some sort where they're acknowledging their change of schedule. If that were to change, where they're gonna go back to a 5-day week or whatever, I would assume that they would do that again. Because per Department of Labor laws, you have to sign and acknowledge your hours of work. So anytime it's changed, whether it's they sign off on the employee status report, change of hours, whatever we decide, but there has to be some sort of signed acknowledgement.
I know, but I guess my concern is if a department head is making this decision of you can work 4 10-hour days, and that's a change to their schedule,
Right.
at what point do you want it to come to the select board for approval? Because if we do a letter and both sign off on it, at that point, the employer has acted. The town has acted, and to notify the select board after that's been done, there may be members of the select board or the majority of the select board might say, that's not a 4-10 position. That should be a position that's working the majority of 5 days. So,
Which at one time, we had that issue.
Right.
So I think what Derek is saying is, do you want it to be added in here that says changes to an alternative schedule have to come before the select board before a
I mean-
letter is issued or something along those lines?
yeah, I mean, I think on a short-term basis, you might have somebody that, okay, for this week I've got 3 night meetings, I know, can we just do it that way.
Well, that's why I asked, if it was gonna be an extended period of time, where like, I will use town hall as an example. If we had someone who was consistently not showing up on Fridays, right, does that impact accessibility to the public? Is that gonna, everyone in the department now wants to do it, and we have an actual scheduling issue on our hand, things like that. If it's someone adjusting for comp time, that's not the same as like fully changing their schedule from this date until it changes again. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, that comp time should be managed by the supervisor. I'm talking about like the board looking at the whole picture of the department and the schedules, which we currently do for anything that's outside of what the job is, the way it's categorized in the job description, what the hours would be. I don't see how that's different than what we're doing now. Am I wrong?
I don't know that,
Currently, there's some that have never come before the board.
That's a change in a work schedule?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
where you
we
have
weren't aware of
agreements.
it in their personnel file.
So the ones that are coming to us, why are they being prompted to come to us?
Typically, it has to do with either a change within the department, like DPW is making the change for the whole department, and not all of them are salary or hourly. I think it should be documented in their personnel plan. We know that from the requirements, and I think by adding language to that effect in here would help clarify that and make sure that it comes before the board.
So for the ones that weren't brought to us, are they still signing off on some sort of,
We were unaware of the change until recently. That's part of why we want to get the policy in place.
and that's the problem that I'm trying to avoid, is just the,
So I think we could say at the department head's discretion, an alternative work schedule may be recommended to the select board or
Yeah.
something along that. I'm not sure
because,
how
I mean,
to
that's just a
capture-
straight up Department of Labor issue. And
Yeah.
it could be litigation if we don't follow up with things like that.
Right.
And that's why I wanted the signing whatever we decide, a change of status letter or whatever, that, I mean, that
Right.
has to be documented by law.
So would that require, does that require the salaried people to, say like DPW, and they go back to the 4-day work week to go through and sign something?
They
Yes.
should,
Yeah, they should
yeah,
be.
Yes.
they should
Yeah.
be.
absolutely.
And that's what I'm saying, we approved that because it met the needs of the
But are we-
department
Oh,
and staff.
have we been doing it?
Alternatively, we can do it once a year by saying, if it's something like that, just in that example, somebody seasonally goes to a four-day week. When we make that change, we can say, this'll be from
With
here
an end
till
date.
here with an end date to make it clear, so they only have to sign it once a year
Right.
rather than on and off. But typically speaking, somebody switching a schedule like that would be kind of, you sign it until further notice, until the schedule changes at some later
Yeah.
date.
Right.
Have we been doing that?
And if their schedule is rotating, that wouldn't apply because
Right,
that
a
would be their
rotating
standard.
schedule's
I'm
different.
talking any like deviation from whatever they were told is gonna be their scheduled days or hours.
Mhm.
You know, like police and, this would not fall for police and fire for union members, or, you know what I mean? Like,
Right, the union members have different, yeah. Yeah, this is for the salaried individuals, so command staff and things like that.
Right.
Eric, did you have a question? You kind of looked at like, what's going on down there?
If you have input, please give it.
I'm fine.
Okay.
So
I
the
mean,
week-to-week
That's what I think.
flexing is still, it sounds like we're all on the same page, that that's managed at the department level.
Yeah.
But it's more if a department head or a salaried employee were to switch to 4-day week or 3-day week or whatever it may
Right.
be,
And I'm not even talking,
we would get that documented and it would get approved by the board.
yeah. And I think something, like, in my opinion, if someone starts at 8, because that's what you guys agreed upon hours, and you want to say, you can come in at 9, but you're going to stay till later, I don't even care about that. I'm looking at staffing hours and being aware of that and changes in where we could see down the road, like, oh, now this whole department wants to do this, and rotating days and schedule, like, that's the issue I'm trying to avoid. It's not that I don't trust department heads to manage their people in hours and time for coverage. That's not what it's about. It's about also then, does it impact the job descriptions in any way. You know what I mean? Like, that has to be addressed, and what happens if there's a snow day, and, you know, like, it all has to be documented, and I'm just trying to avoid those situations of people's schedules were changed and someone else hears about it, and then it becomes a whole thing for a whole department. I'm not trying to micromanage the surface, like the weekly, daily time of people. I'm looking at like changes to what their contractual obligations are to the town. Does that clarify a little bit more? Okay. Does anyone else have thoughts and opinions? My Department of Labor anxiety got real high with that one. I don't like that.
Bells and whistles, yes. I think we
So
can
on
add
this
that.
one, would the board prefer a clean copy perhaps
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
that's a
could
good
just-
idea.
That's just,
at next
Okay.
week's meeting?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's just those two things, right?
Yep.
Do you need it? Do you guys need a thing?
Let's just-
Well, if we're gonna sign it, I'd like to see the cleaned up, even if it's just a couple minor changes.
So are we set with this, or we're gonna wait as amended, or what do you want to do?
No, I'm good. With the amendments, I'm good with.
The clean copy would be down for any of them too with the signature folder on the consent agenda, so.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, I think for the board, we could set a, 6/1 of 25 to have that first meeting of the month, to have a meeting with the department heads to see how it's working, like give it some time for input if it's a concern. Maybe that's the time when we remove that clause if it's just a not necessary thing.
I think once we get the current schedules documented, I don't think people change them all that often.
Right.
It's just a matter of us catching up with department heads to find out who has differing schedules.
Okay. What was this? Do you want a motion or do you want to wait for the clean version? So I'll make a motion, the changes.
If you were fine with it, we could just do it as amended,
Yeah, no,
and
just
then we'll sign a
sign
clean
the
copy.
clean copy, yeah.
Okay, that's good with everyone?
Yeah.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the salaried employee policy as amended with recommended changes.
I'll second that.
Motion by Kelly, seconded by Collis. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, motion passes.
The next one you have is the purchasing policy. This one, again, is one that you received at the last meeting, but there were some changes, and those are highlighted in yellow. The changes that came from the departments were mostly just to clarify what was being proposed. On page 4, you're going to see that where it previously had said subscription renewal waiver, it now says memorandum or acceptable equivalent. This was because departments were concerned about if they had to use the forms in the back of the policy, if they were more comfortable putting all of the information onto a memo and sending that over. And the finance director and I discussed it and both felt like as long as the documentation is there, that's really what we needed. It doesn't have to be on the form. If some people feel like filling in the blanks on the form is easier than starting from a blank memo and having to craft the whole thing, that's fine. So you'll see that's changed throughout to say, or an acceptable equivalent for documentation. And then that new section there, 1.16, this is just to capture the state law transactions with elected officials. So under state law, no financial transaction to buy or sell goods, commodities, real estate, or other personal property in excess of $200 shall occur without first conducting an open and competitive bid process. So that's just the law that we wanted to make sure was captured in here to make it very clear to anybody who we might be doing business with.
So I have a question on page 4,
Mm-hmm.
1.14. So this says that the select board designates the finance director the responsible official for approving of all exceptions explicitly written within this policy. What does that mean?
So that means throughout the policy, you're going to find certain things that were either already in here or were proposed to be added, that would say something like, I think the previous page, page 3, has an example of it, 1.11, technology enhancements. So already in the existing policy, the procurement of technology equipment may be excluded from the purchasing policy provision with the approval of the finance director. And this was because we had that discussion about a year or two ago when this was added, that hardware and software standardization was critical to maintaining the computer infrastructure. We couldn't just go out and buy, you know, an Apple if Windows is what everything else is operating on. So in order to avoid having to get 3 quotes for that standardization, if we needed a very specific piece of equipment, they could document it, and that documentation would be attached to the PO. They still have to get their quotes for whatever it is, but instead of going out and getting a quote for an Air, if we're on a Dell, I mean, Brian can help me out with better examples probably, but the idea was to standardize it. So that's an exception that's specifically written into the policy.
So
And
all
on,
of,
and on, if you look at page 6, there's a whole list of exceptions
that's
to
what I was,
quotations and bids.
that's what I was gonna ask. So the exceptions explicitly written in this policy,
Yes.
I assume that not only what's explicitly outlined in this policy, but everything across the board that we would make an exception for is currently in this draft?
No,
No.
you could waive.
The select board has
The
the authority to
select board
waive
has
anything,
to ultimately waive anything.
Okay,
but it would
Yeah,
have
but
to
the
come to
problem
the
with
board.
that is, I had this discussion before, we can waive everything, but if you've given them the authority to purchase it and they've already purchased it, you can't waive it.
no, here, well, hold on. This is why I was asking this question. So the finance director can waive things that are explicitly noted in this policy, which we can go through right now, because that's what I wanted to clarify.
We're not
And
gonna go
it's-
through it tonight, I wanna go through this with a fine tooth comb. There's so many things that are wrong in here, that you're giving away the responsibility that you were elected to do. When you tell the purchasing, the finance director can do this, I'm gonna go through this with a fine tooth comb, because the select board cannot be giving up their duties. You cannot have a pile of bills
Peter, I'm
given to you
asking
on
for
Monday.
clarification so that I can go through this appropriately.
but I'm just
So my
saying-
second question is that in that same paragraph, it says, all other exceptions to the purchasing policy shall be formally waived by the select board at a regularly scheduled meeting prior to the purchase being executed. The select board may waive any and all provisions of this policy if the situation demands. So again, to clarify, anything that might be excused by the finance director is noted in this policy?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, the select board would have to do at a meeting prior? Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that so that the rest of it falls in line, so I can find those things.
You know, a few years ago, I don't know if any of you guys were around, Carlos and Mark were probably around, we had a what they call it, commission to change our form of government, which would have been to a town manager form of government, and the town ultimately soundly turned it down. And this is some of the duties of a town manager form of government, and that's not what we are. If that's what we want to do, then you have to come up with a committee, you put the thing together, you put it out to the town voters. We're ultimately the ones, we should be making our decisions every single week. Go in there, we don't want to have a bunch of bills. I've seen bills come in, I'm saying, holy smokes, why do we do that? Why are we paying for this? And we need to have more, that's the scrutiny we have. We can't have it that, well, finance director okayed it. And that's not what I want to do. I want to be able to, and we're still going to talk about the limits were outrageous, I mean, compared to other towns around us. So, I mean, this is,
So to the question that Kelly had asked about, are we already doing these exceptions? The ones that you see in here are ones that are, almost all of them, I can show you which ones aren't, but are already in process. So for instance, a sole source purchase is already in the existing policy. This revision was to actually clarify it and put better guardrails on it to make it very clear about if you're going to do a sole source purchase, what qualifies, what steps have to be taken, what has to be documented. Those currently don't come before the select board.
Sole source purchasing comes before us all the time. And we, on large purchases, when we go out to bid for something and only one person bids on it, that's a sole source. I mean, we do, that comes before us quite often. I'm not sure.
Those are only when they reach a certain threshold.
Okay, and that's the threshold you're trying to
So the
change.
thresholds is a separate discussion.
Okay.
This was just in reference to the,
So we should start at the beginning, at the end, the
Okay.
way this is done, and get the threshold straightened out, so you can go back and say, okay, I can live with that.
okay.
Yeah, it's an important decision.
So I believe Derek sent a separate document that had.
There was a printed copy in your packet that had a breakdown of what we see in some of the surrounding communities, yes, as well as the Goffstown School District.
The school district's budget's a little bit different than ours.
I would argue, when you're talking about purchases, we actually have bigger capital purchases and bigger operating purchases than the school. We have a department that takes care of our roads. Things have escalated, so while the school does have a greater budget, it's largely personnel driven.
Derek, this chart you just gave us shows us that they had, New Boston, it's a draft proposal, so you can't really say that that's what it is. But the highest one in here is $15,000. Is that accurate?
They're current, yes, they're current, they
They're
they require.
So it doesn't matter what the draft proposal is, that's off the cliff. You're giving us a draft proposal that's twice as much as them.
And
And
ultimately,
Bedford's
it's,
5,000 and they got a town manager form of government. Why is that? Because the town council says this is what we give the town manager the authority to spend up to before it comes to us.
so ultimately, it's the board's decision on the policy, and we bring the policy back to the department heads and say, you need to operate within these confines.
And that's what brings me back to this, before we get to that, because under that one, department heads have control up to $50,000.
As is proposed in the draft that's before you this evening.
Right.
Yes.
So part of why we had even suggested higher thresholds, the threshold may not be the one that was suggested, that's of course at the board's discretion, but the reason we had even attempted to suggest anything else is because we were finding a lot of purchases were outside of the compliance of the policy, and they weren't necessarily coming to the board because of other existing exceptions, or we were running into issues where they just were not complying with the purchasing policy, and the auditors had cited us on it now 3 separate times, each of our financial audits as well as our single audit, that we are not compliant with our purchasing policy, and that included the select board waiving the purchasing policy for perhaps a sealed bid, where only one bid came in or something like that. And so we wanted to get those clarifying items into the policy.
I can justify, when we only get one bid for something and we have a project that gets, I can justify that, say, hey, we put it off for bid, and nobody else bid it, we need to get it done. I can justify that. Okay? I don't think
It
that's.
still has to be documented first.
I get it, I don't think that's a reason to raise the limit to $50,000.
So
That's-
we're talking about increasing efficiencies versus at what level do we scrutinize? I mean, that's what it boils down to. And I think efficiency, improving efficiencies is important, but what do we set that number at? And I know, Peter, you've been.
I'm pretty vocal about it.
Yeah,
I'm
you
not-
were. Yeah, I know you were.
I don't, why are we gonna be the highest?
Yeah.
Would you consider the thresholds that the Goffstown School District is using,
No,
mirroring that?
no. It's too much. That's $50,000. I'm not giving, and I have nothing against department heads or anything like that. I'm not giving somebody carte blanche on a $50,000. Eric's gonna take me and taser me out when you leave. I'm not giving somebody carte blanche $50,000. That's irresponsible on my part, I feel. Not that I don't trust them. We've got a great department, but we will need to have control. That's what we were elected to do. I can't do that. Maybe the rest of these can, but I would never say this. I understand we need to look at a way to, it's not so much the dollar amount as it is streamlining the process. That's the process, that's what I'm hearing is, it takes too long to get it done. So your answer is, well, we'll just put no limit on it, that way you don't have to wait. Well, that's not the answer either.
Yeah, I get it, there needs to be a balance. Question is, where do we strike that balance?
And that's where those other exceptions that
Yeah.
were outlined in here we're attempting to do.
And you'd also be technically, you could overrule your CIP process because now you've exceeded the CIP limits.
So
So
the
some-
Certainly don't want
CIP
that.
limit is 50,000.
Pardon me?
The CIP limit is 50,000.
Not on everything though, I thought it was 25 on some stuff, like was it wheeled vehicles or?
They changed it.
They changed it?
Oh, it's because I wanted lawnmowers on the CIP matrix. That's why we lowered it years ago. Danielle, can you walk me through, so where it says written quotes, number 3, for 3 written quotes,
Yep.
it says $5,000 to $24,999.
Mhm.
So can you explain what the process is for that dollar amount?
That's what we're currently in, right?
Yep.
That's what we're currently doing.
Yep, so the department head would have to obtain 3 written quotes. They'd have to attach all 3 of their quotes to their purchase order, and they would have to explain which quote they're moving forward with, because it may not be the lowest of the quotes if they had concern maybe with the product or service that was suggested. And then a purchase order would be approved by the department head, because sometimes it's entered by someone else in the department. And then it gets reviewed by the finance director to ensure that all of the documentation is there, and the finance director signs off on it, and then the purchase can be made.
And that's anything between $5,000 and $24,999.
Yes.
correct? Okay. And at $25,000, we go to the RFP bid process.
Right.
Okay. In your experience, because I'm looking at, where did it go? Bedford, budgeted versus non-budgeted items.
Mm-hmm.
How often does non-budgeted items come up that falls within that threshold?
In Bedford's case, or in
No,
our case, if
in
we
our
were to
case.
apply?
I'm just,
Not very often. Most of the items that come forward were budgeted, either planned, or perhaps it was an area where an equipment piece failed and had to be repaired or something like that. We're seeing most of the POs that come forward that are above the 25,000 are either related to a specific project, like DPW is getting a delivery of curbing, or something like that, and going through and creating a PO for something that's considered essentially to them the same as ordering a case of paper, is excessive and time consuming and burdensome for that department as well as finance. By far, DPW has the most POs out of any department, just because of their cost for materials that they're using and their equipment costs.
so in the instance of POs not meeting the purchasing policy, what are the standard kind of roadblocks that you run into with those things?
So it's
What
all-
are the auditors hitting on?
So it's a lot of the items in here are coming in where a department places an order, and then they get their invoice in, and all of a sudden it's over $5,000. And so they're like, whoops, I gotta do a PO, but I didn't get 3 written quotes first, because I didn't think it was gonna exceed 5,000, I thought it was gonna come in at 4,000. But with shipping and this and that, now that price of that good pushes me over the $5,000 limit, I gotta go back in time and get 3 quotes and then document it. It's not the $25,000, it's the lower end.
Right, I realize that, but again, when we're talking about efficiencies, I'm trying to figure out how, so
that's
how does one put in an order for something without knowing what the cost is going to be? What ordering systems are we using that are not informing prior to purchase what the cost is?
Great question for the department heads. It's my understanding a lot of times it could be an order of perhaps equipment or uniform, something like that, where just the quantity added up to exceed a threshold. Sometimes for DPW, it is just ordering their regular materials. I don't know how they place those orders, if it's by phone or how that's designated. Adam could speak to that. And then
Who is making those orders? That would be my next question. Is it the department head or is it someone else?
depends on the
If you
department.
can see that when you're going through the bills.
I know that. I mean, I see the bills. It doesn't always say who
Yeah, it
made the
usually does.
purchase.
It'll say ordered by Mike Hillhouse.
Not all the time.
Well, a lot of them, most of them
Yeah.
do. They say who they're ordered by.
Mm-hmm.
Just like fire chief, I see stuff, Deputy Selleck, and, that's, the same over the PD. They've got somebody's name on them. So when they use the credit card, that's on somebody's credit card. So, I mean, those items are there if we take the time to look for it and say who's spending the money. I understand $5,000 that should be increased. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is the 50,000. So if you wanted to say, let's take this 5,000 and make it 10,000, 25,000, I could get along with something like, I think that would be reasonable.
Okay. If it's budgeted.
Huh?
If it's budgeted.
Yeah, of course.
Well, it doesn't say that.
And hopefully they're not gonna spend over their budget. But I would feel more comfortable with that, raising that bottom number. That seems to be what we're hearing is the problem, like she said. It's not the 25,000. It's when they get to that ordering that, stone or whatever, and they think it's gonna be, they order, 100 ton of stone, and it was supposed to be 450, but then delivery charge brings it up to over 5,000. Well, then, geez, but normally we already have a bid on that kind of stuff, but.
Good evening. Just real quick too, the other piece of that is, another example is apparatus repairs. I run into it all the time. The truck's gonna go to a vendor for repairs. And, we're anticipating around $4,200. And something typically happens and it goes over 5,000. So that was another example that she's referring to, right? So I have to go to the specialty vendor because they're the manufacturer of the vehicle and we run over. So according to policy, I gotta go back and get 3 quotes. But I
If you
can't
can
get
find
3
three
quotes.
people.
Right.
and-
Too late, but I understand that, it's,
Yeah.
I mean, there's situations that's gonna happen. We had a situation where we lost a motor in one of our trucks over at the transfer station, and it was $30,000. I mean,
Right.
that's one of those things where you don't have an option.
Right.
I get that, but just on an everyday basis, to have the limit at $50,000 doesn't cut it for me. I think the 10 to 25 is reasonable. I don't think that's holding anybody back that much. And, how often is it, now you've got a set of tires on one of the fire trucks, it's almost, $6,000, $7,000. I
Right.
get that,
Yeah.
but that's normal stuff, that's budgeted stuff.
And that is manageable. I am more referring to like uniforms. That's something that we order a lot of and pay for a lot of people's things. Those prices seem to be fluctuating quite a bit. I don't know of any instance where that's changed, but that's something I could foresee oh, it's always been this price and this time we put in an order and it was way more.
Right.
Is there an easy way we can verify? Is it an online system? I don't know. But that's more what I was thinking and with the issues with the written quote and all that, with a single vendor.
Well, purchasing uniforms, that's different than your uniform rental. Your uniform rental is a contract.
I'm just saying, like,
I get it. No, I agree.
DPW, police, fire, they order all the time, stuff they've been ordering forever, and then one day it's $5 more a unit. I get that. But is there a way we can confirm prior to ordering? I mean, I do it when I order office supplies, you know what I mean? Like, you
Oh,
just,
me too.
at
I
a
mean,
glance.
Believe me, when I'm selling somebody, well, how much does this cost? And
Right.
What's the total?
Right.
And I have to include freight because, some of the stuff I ship is $400 or $500.
But to
Right.
Danielle's point, if they're calling on the phone, oh, hey, give me 10 more of these.
Well, there has to be some responsibility from the
That's what I'm
people.
saying, maybe that's more of an internal check to
Right.
see where we're running into those problems and why, like tires and tools, that's always a thing too, we see fluctuations in.
Jim, you're awful quiet over there.
Well, I'm just thinking, is it worth it to have the town, the department heads come in and talk about it and tell us what their problems are? Would it be good to have their input into,
Well,
Eric's,
it's really only
Adam
missing.
seems to be the biggest culprit, or the biggest victim
It
of
was
this
his wife's
policy,
birthday
so.
today, so you would have been, I reached out to ask if he was going to, he said, no, he had his wife's birthday today, so. You want to take this up Monday?
Well, we could do that, I mean,
Would it be inconvenience, chief?
Yep.
You're not going to comment there?
I just stated mine.
Yeah.
You guys can come up and talk about ours, but.
I mean, to me, this discussion begs some statistical analysis, some data, so we can look at it and say, well, here's the problem it's creating, and here's how often it's creating it, and here's the cost associated with each time it occurs. I mean, that, to me, gives me much more information to make a decision on. Is it 50 or is it 25, or what should it be? Well, it should be 25 because at 50, it should be at 50 because at 25, here's how many times it kicks in, and how many times we have to deal with it, and how much money and effort is put into these things.
Well, if you go through the bills, you would see,
Yeah.
you could tell that it's not that often.
Well, I know you can see
The
that.
stuff that's like in the road plan and things like that, you know where it's
There's a
going.
lot of 6,000 plus dollar bills in that, in the budget, and, I mean,
Oh, yeah, we're talking about single purchases.
yeah, even single purchases, but.
Go ahead,
I
speak
was,
up.
I was ready to go 10 and 25 today.
Bobby?
I like that too, but I just thought, there
Well, I
may
think
be
Collins
some
wants-
reason we don't know about.
Well, let's talk about it. 10 and 25, I think is moving in the right direction.
That's doubling the lower number.
Yeah, it is.
And
Yeah.
that seems to be, as we heard from Danielle, that's the problem, is the
That's
lower.
the-
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
where the
yeah.
problem is
Right.
on the lower number.
I see that, yeah.
I mean, I'll just say, I think input from the department heads is very valuable, and I think if it's Monday, that's great, but also this board can change the threshold limits at any
Anytime.
time.
Yeah, we don't
Anytime
have
we
to
want.
post this the same way we do.
So if
with
someone
other
comes in and
policies.
says, wait, actually, mine is with the RFP process, we could always then change that as well. I'm just saying that out loud, because.
We are finding more and more instances that we have to go out to RFP where it seems like perhaps 3 quotes may be more warranted, and I was wondering if it may be favorable for that type of efficiency to put something that says anything greater than 25,000, or maybe a separate range in there of when it can go to RFP and when it can be a select board quote, because I believe last time Chairman Georgiantis had indicated that you didn't necessarily have a problem if they got 3 quotes and came to the board and discussed those quotes, but our concern, of course, is if that were to happen and we forego the sealed bid RFP process, then the board truly has to pick from those 3 quotes, because once that process is started, we can't kind of turn the clock back and do a sealed bid because they're out there. But I'm wondering if, for efficiency's sake, if that maybe we added a 2-tier process to the RFP where an individual for between 25,000 and 50,000 could bring 3 quotes to the board and not have to post a whole project. For instance, we've seen more improvements with facilities that fall into that 25 to 50 range. Like say we need to replace flooring in town hall upstairs because tiles are chipping or something. That's gonna exceed 25,000. But is it a project that rises to the level of going out with specifications and having companies put in sealed bids? Or is it more appropriate to get 3 quotes from flooring vendors who can measure out the space and say, here's your quote?
I understand what you're saying,
that
but the only
something that
problem
would
with the only issue with what you're saying is when you do it that way, you gotta make sure, an RFP is a request for, right, so, but you're giving them specs. Now, as long as you're gonna tell somebody you got 3 quotes, and you give them the specs that they gotta meet,
Right.
it's almost the same thing as an RFP.
I have a question though. So if, I don't disagree, but I'm asking a formality of the process. So if the department head then comes to the board, and the board, for some reason, says, this needs to go to RFP, at that point, we wouldn't be able to do that, right? Because we've already made public 3 quotes with prices. So I would say the stopgap for that decision would have to be pretty,
Early in the process.
or thorough. I don't know the best way to do that, but because if we hit the 3 quotes and then we're like, wait, hold on a second, we can't go back at that point.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
turning back.
Why would we not communicate to the department heads that we've discussed this and we're considering changing the limits to 10 and 25? If you've got and we tend to take formal action on this and date certain, if you've got a problem with this, give us concrete examples as to why it's a problem for you. To me, that would help me understand what the department heads' concerns are. And I think it establishes a two-way communication. Just a suggestion.
Do you want me to ask them to come in next Monday? Is that necessary?
I don't, I'd have to think about it. I don't know if that's necessary.
I don't think it'd be necessary.
No, I think
but-
as long as we
but
communicate it to
Collis
them.
brings up a good point. If we can ask the department heads to give us some feedback, and then we'll have the feedback in our hands to act on this.
Yep, and say, we got great feedback, and after we've had, look at it, say, you know what, it makes sense what the department heads are saying. Maybe it's better at a different number.
And I think
I
that
think
would.
that streamline the process is the issue.
Oh, there's no question.
Okay, I don't have a problem with figuring something out. So what are we doing?
So, we're going to ask for Monday that if any department heads would like to give input on why a 10,
25.
25 will still
Sufficient.
create a barrier to efficiencies if they come in and tell us.
Yeah.
Tell us
If we
why.
don't hear from them, they're good.
Yeah,
We can
Yeah.
do 10, 25, I'm happy with that.
yeah,
Okay, that's what we'll do.
yeah.
Do you want,
We can communicate that. Are there any other questions about the other red lines? I think we sent this out a couple weeks ago, so does the board want additional time to review the proposed changes?
I mean, I want to go through the highlighted parts.
well, we're gonna discuss it Monday night, so if there's any questions, I would say reach out to Derek on it. I still have, you know, that,
We have enough time between now and Monday night to make the decision on this, and
yeah, well, I'm just saying, we got this, I still have a question on, the select board designates the finance director, the responsible official for approval of all exceptions explicitly written in this policy. So we're actually making almost like a purchasing needed, isn't it?
Only for the items that are specifically outlined in here. So if there was something in here that the select board wasn't comfortable with, a lot of what you're gonna see are ones that already exist, items that have already been discussed. So state bid is an exception. The board's already made it clear and puts it in the policy that they can use a state bid,
Right.
and here's the parameters. This just clarifies, once those parameters are met, the finance director verifies that that parameter matches exactly what is in the policy the board approved, then they can give the green light on that. Same thing for, sole source or critical infrastructure repair, where we can't necessarily call a meeting, it's an emergency repair, something like that. Agency approved payments, that's new, but I think it's pretty clear in there. Those are, if we have a bond payment, it's already gone before the voters, it's a bond payment that has to be made. So the logic there, and the auditor's suggestion was the finance department would already have the documentation necessary to support that and make that disbursement without saying, hey, you're making this disbursement, where's your 3 quotes? You're not gonna have 3 quotes, you have to pay the county's bill. That's what it is. So all we were doing with these exceptions in the policy was documenting those unique things that do come up pretty regularly that are already within the policy.
And that was my clarifying question for Danielle, of were they all noted in here? And she said yes, and anything outside of that would still come to the board. But I needed to, that's why I wanted to mark where they were, because I don't know.
Well, eventually it still comes to the board and gets,
Yes, everything gets approved in the warrant.
right.
But this is just in the process, if a department calls us and they have a diagnostic repair, they've disassembled the truck, they figured out the issue, we're not gonna say, okay, now have them put the truck together, send it down the street to the next guy for him to do the same thing. That would be crazy. So having an exception that says a diagnostic repair is this, it has to qualify under this, and documenting all of that, so there's no surprise when the bill comes in and we say, hey, where's your 3 quotes, this costs so much. So,
Well, there's certain common sense that goes along with this type of stuff too. I mean, like I said, you sent the truck over for engine problem, it cost $32,000. What are you gonna do? Don't fix it?
yeah, and the auditors was just saying that these are ones that they see on a regular basis, as far as exceptions, they call them, to the policy. And they say as long as you outline in your policy what those exceptions are, what you have to do to meet those exceptions, how you're gonna document them, then it's easy to get all those checks in the correct boxes and have everything documented and explained, and then it's attached to the PO and the invoice. So when it comes to the board, they see with the warrant, oh, we understand that this truck was out for repair and it's all right here in the documentation.
And we're gonna move forward with this on Monday.
Okay.
Next is, Derek, are we ready to go into this, or?
No, that is for non-meeting.
Not me?
I think for members that brought their packet from last week, it was the review of the bid recommendation for the virtualized infrastructure REIT.
Right.
Oh, there it is.
So tired of the 18th?
Yeah, it was this big paper, it was added. Right there, this one, with the funding
Yes.
options?
What tab is it at?
It's just a separate piece of paper. for this, so I can share it with you.
Okay.
So I know you had the funding options laid out in there, Derek, for that, and we have 150,000 that was budgeted already,
Yes.
with the 210 that we can't use for upstairs.
Correct.
I did some quick math, but I just want to clarify again, we have to choose an option from the top and the bottom, right? Because this is for the ongoing,
So that was for the monitoring, yes.
so I did some quick math, don't know if it's right, but we're still about $30,000 short, if I'm doing that correctly.
There's none of the bids, I thought. Just take a quick look.
Oh, it's okay.
There was a
Carlos, you can use
handout,
mine.
Jim, that's probably why you don't have it
Yeah,
here.
I can't, okay.
Carlos, you could show
Yep.
Jim if you want.
Yep, sure, I'll show.
Just for a second,
can look.
just let me see.
Absolutely.
Pete, I was just saying, so I did some quick math on the 150,000 plus we had the 210 from upstairs, from what we can't do from upstairs, so to cover this, and if someone could verify my math, that would be great. We're still short with each of these funding options, because we have to do the ongoing monitoring and the build. We're still about $30,000 short, so this number can be reduced to $30,000, if I'm correct. Is that right?
Which number are you?
The 108,727?
Sorry, so the funding option 1
Yeah,
The
Yeah.
total number, $258,727.76,
yes,
plus the $131,635.86.
yes.
Added together, and then I subtracted the $150,000,
Yep.
the $210,000.
Okay,
And that still left, if I did my math correctly, about a $30,000 gap. So that would mean that the townwide employee benefits line could be reduced from $108,727 to $30,000 and
Yes.
change, whatever it
Change.
is. Okay,
yes, you can do that.
I was already figuring it out on my paper. Does that make sense? Jim, I know you weren't here for,
So just to bring, Jim, to bring you up to speed, we had a significant savings due to vacancies as well as elections and turnover in our insurance line in the budget. So the recommendation was to fund the other half of this project, really for that,
With that savings.
to use those savings.
We have the money.
Another funding option, I think I put it as option 3, was you could put this in the 2025 budget. I would recommend against that, but that is ultimately, you could do that as well.
well, we have the $150,000 already budgeted, thank you. And then the 210 from the town hall project that we can't use, and there's still some invest money left over. We still have about $40,000 if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, there's, I think there's 47, but I
Okay.
think next meeting we'll definitely have better numbers. We were waiting on one invoice from library on their
Okay, great.
roofing and siding
Because I
repair.
still have some ideas, like the exploding batteries and the e-bike that we could purchase if we don't have any other allocations.
And I think, wasn't there a
The exploding batteries are first, I'm
recommendation
sorry.
about the
That's,
pool too?
Yeah, and Rick may have he'll most likely bring back bids for the pool demolition. He did open those.
Well, that's what he said, it's
Would-
40,000.
the state's demolition grant that they had,
Unfortunately,
Does
the
the pool
state
count?
closed all of their ARPA fund programs
Okay.
probably about 3 months ago, and did final selections, because their approval process is a lot
Yeah.
longer when you have to involve governor and
Right.
council. So we could not do it for that.
do we have any inkling, or could we reach out to the office that distributed the ARPA funds to see if there potentially might be another round?
I can reach out to BEA and ask them if they anticipate another round. All of the funds had to be allocated by the end of 2024, so it's doubtful, but I can definitely reach out to,
You don't want to call them and say, do you have any
Yeah.
more money? Just
yeah,
just
I
for
can
fun.
say we've got a
Just for
demo
fun.
project that if you're looking to get rid of $40,000.
You could sure use it, right?
Well, no, that was great.
Yeah.
We were able to utilize that grant. If we could do it again, I would love to, instead of, well, we could use the.
All right, so let's go
investment
back to
account.
this. Are we saying that we're going to use that, what we talked about tonight, the 200, and these funds to fund this project? Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Did you
That's
make?
what I'm saying.
Was that a motion?
yes.
And it was seconded by
Yep.
Mark.
Was my distribution of funds clear, or would you like me to do it
Yes,
again?
nope,
Okay.
nope, we're clear on that.
Big smile on the back over there.
Finally! He's
Okay,
like, darn,
any
now I have to
discussion?
get it going.
Any more discussion? We talked about this before, how that we needed to get the service done and all that. So there was a motion by Kelly, it was seconded by Mark. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, motion passes.
Merry Christmas.
Maybe. Brian's gonna be real busy.
It'll be a long process.
Yeah.
All right, now what's next?
That was all we had for items for the board this evening. We do have.
Action matrix?
I did not print out an action matrix, I apologize about that, we'll get you one for next week on the vehicles are out. And I think we had one non-public item and one non-meeting item.
Okay, we gotta go non-public.
Maybe public comment first, and I'll do that.
Yeah, anybody have public comment? Seeing none, all in favor of closing public comment? Yes, we are. Yes. I'm getting tired.
I'll make a motion, we go into RSA 91A:3, 2 for
Illegal,
illegal.
And we also had
Oh,
compensation.
I'm sorry, A, compensation as
A,
well. You do actually have that
compensation.
in your packet.
Second.
Did you say illegal or illegal?
E.
Illegal.
Or
Yeah.
legal.
E in
Follow the
parentheses.
eagle, follow the eagle.
Okay, all
Okay,
right.
motion by Mark, it was seconded by Kelly. It's a roll call, Mark?
Yes.
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 Get out.
I'm going.
You have to tell them twice.
I'm going.